Well, the piece that I had flagged for you is by Jeffrey Ingersoll over at the Daily Caller. It's titled "Toxic Empathy is the Biggest Threat to America Right Now."
It's a bold claim.
We need men to stop it. And, you know, the claim that Jeffrey is making, and it's something that I have felt before and I have heard before, is that generally we're living in a state right now where America has been taken over by a professional female class. The people who are running Cracker Barrel and driving Star Wars into the ground and driving male teachers out of the classroom, feminizing every aspect of culture. And with
not
that,
traditionally feminine
Yes.
ways, but this kind of pseudo you go girl weird fetishization of women.
Not just you go girl, but I mean like the general attitude being that every time there is bad behavior at play, it can simply be corrected with, you know, a little bit of love and a hand on the shoulder. And like that's the general attitude. And that's women's nature. You know, we on the right, we believe in men and women's nature. That's what makes us right in this moment in politics.
Nice.
We are of the belief that women are actually quite good at this. And so when they achieve a great amount of cultural and political power, that becomes the mode of politics. Overcorrection rather than punishment, rather than the closed fist that, I don't know, masculine men might be more inclined to deliver as a solution to problems such as a mentally ill person being out on the streets instead of locked up where he can't hurt people.
So I want to pivot that to the new generation. There's been a lot of new surveys that have come out suggesting what men and women in Generation Z are finding a lot of values in. It doesn't seem like the kind of millennial age of how gender is viewed, how roles and empathy are viewed, are kind of leading the charge anymore. What are you seeing on the ground there with you young kids?
Well, it's very interesting you bring up that new NBC poll that came out on Monday, because we see with Gen Z, we're so disaffected by everything that it's not the gender divides of like raising a family versus, you know, supporting a family, but both men and women on the right and the left in Gen Z, based on this poll, are really prioritizing their personal success, their personal careers, and they're just forgetting all of those things that make you inherently female and male. And that could be in part because of the way that the culture has told us, like, you have to ignore everything that makes you inherently female and male. And that's how you get stuff like toxic empathy, especially towards criminal males, and just a whole pot that we could get into.
Yeah, and I think with, you know, this incident in Charlotte, there are a couple things I think about it. One, this is really out of character for Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm from this area. That train in particular is a pretty safe place for students to travel. These things are anomalies in this part of the country or in this particular city. But by and large, what we're seeing with this person who was known to be mentally ill, who had told his family and medical professionals in a 911 call that he thought there was something inside of him trying to get out, which, I mean, to me, again, I'm like, demonic presence, but
confirmed that he attacked his sister as well. And again,
violent.
I just want to point out as well, producer Daniel, also being from North Carolina, we were on the phone right after this video had come out. And, you know, he told me just briefly that it did shock. There's an element of kind of the still baby boomer held South in the coastal regions that's still so traditional and it's common sense that this kind of stuff is unusual to the extreme, almost, these kind of crimes.
I think what's in the background here is the broader debate that is picked up about involuntary detainment of people who are suffering with extreme mental illness and are living out on the streets and threatening people when they walk by. And one of the reasons, going back to men and women, that I think that this exists is because most of the use of involuntary detainment for mentally ill people, we often hear about that with the case of depressed and mentally ill housewives in the 50s, 60s, early 70s.
You know those reels where the lady's like, my husband's coming home soon, and like the kitchen magnets spell like crude words.
This was a whole thing. And after the sexual revolution and sort of women entered the workforce and politics, this kind of became verboten, the idea that you could just, you know, say somebody is bipolar or schizophrenic and get rid of them.
Like the red flag law concerns, but with mental health in the mid 20th century.
Yeah. But then we leave these people out and we don't help them in any way, shape, or form. We leave them out in the elements. We leave leave them out to starve, and eventually to lose control of their faculties and murder someone. I honestly feel bad for everybody involved here. The victim, I feel bad for the killer. Like, the killer didn't deserve to be left like this.
The manifesto
to cause
of
harm to people.
The manifesto of the transgender shooter in Minneapolis.
I'm very much the same way.
Again, the
my heart
mania.
breaks for this person. These people are being betrayed by this element that we are calling toxic empathy, where in order to love somebody, we never have to use any sort of force or persuasion or taking away their choices in order to demonstrate a love for them.
Well, it's interesting you talk about being betrayed by a system, because that is something that I've heard on both the left and the right in terms of this stabbing, but it's not necessarily the same system. The left is saying they've been abused and betrayed by the criminal justice system and they just need a big hug and restorative justice. But then the right is like, no, they've been betrayed by the culture that we have created over the past 60, 70 years and the approaches that we take to mental health and criminals. And toxic empathy totally exists, but then it's where is that toxic empathy when it comes to or where is that empathy period when it comes to the 23-year-old girl who's sitting on the train, or the man who's told, the teenage boy who's told hey, you can't say that to a girl, you can't Snapchat a girl like that, but then we let these criminal men go run free and kill these 23-year-old girls. I was on a train when I read this. I was on DC public transit when I read this. I'm a 23-year-old girl too. This made me extremely upset, and toxic empathy is the exact problem. Jeffrey Ingersoll put it exactly right. It just makes me so upset.
I'll pivot here with that to something that I'm really encouraged in the. So in Indiana, I'm going to take this completely off topic. We did not have this on the script. In my church in Newcastle, Indiana, does this thing called Harvest Teen Rally every single year. And they work with a bunch of other local churches, and they bring this huge tent out into this gorgeous farm in eastern central Indiana. And they have this big, huge rally of teenagers. They hear a couple of services, and there's a ton of really cool games, and it's a wonderful day for teens. It's a phenomenal thing. They've done it for decades. I went to it a bunch when I was in high school. And the thing that the speaker, Jim Shetler, the preacher who came down and spoke at the Harvest Teen Rally this year, this was just this last Saturday, said he had not seen such engagement from teens in any of the years he's been with it. Man's getting up there. And he's not seen this engagement. There is such a hunger for a return to common sense values that don't lead to this weird empathetic, again, because it's not real empathy, it's this blind affirmation, listlessness, hedonism. I know obviously you with Geeky Stoics, you'd appreciate that. We've talked about this a lot. There is such a yearning in the younger generations for what older generations were able to take for granted, not in a bad way. They were able to take it for granted because it had been passed down and instilled, and it was so natural to them that we spent our childhood seeing it ripped away from us, and you almost didn't get to experience the last vestiges of the Daniel pennies that would always be around when something got out of hand.
We were talking about this right before we started filming, but we were like, what would each of us do if we were in that situation? Would we be like the many people who are on the train who just were paralyzed by fear, which honestly, I don't think is the right thing to do, but I understand it completely because again, you don't want to get Daniel pennied. Or would you hop in? Me as a woman, what would I even be able to do without getting harmed as well? And it's just, we don't know what to do because if you make justice happen when the lawmakers won't and your government won't, then you'll get
There's a lot of things going on in the video. I mean, in addition to the violent act, there is the everyone turning away. There's two people within arm's reach of the victim who don't even rush to go help apply any pressure to the wound. They simply walk away from the victim so as not to perhaps incur harm themselves. And then you see people looking up from their phones and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? But there are the people who did see what happened and they still don't move to try and detain this person, possibly because he has a knife and that's scary, but also again the Daniel Penny factor. We have discouraged people from acting heroically in the public sphere, and that is namely something that has been stripped away from most American men because they have greater capacity to do this and they are afraid to use that power.
And I want to make this clear in the video that the killer, he stabs her and then he gets up and he walks away past people. For some reason, when I originally read the story, I believed that perhaps that she had bled out again, eyes shut forward, passing out quietly. She's wide-eyed awake, stares at her attacker as he walks off. And the lady next does nothing. She's bleeding out. She could have been saved. She could have been saved. I am struck by this, that there is a man behind the killer who I'm more angry at in this moment in time. He just got up and walked right behind the killer right away with his ear pods in, just, walking away, whatever. He could have saved her. Even if he just would have put pressure on the wound, he could have saved her. And I think that as a man, I'm furious with him especially. You're a man. I'm not talking about the killer. The man behind that got up and just walked away. What a coward. What a coward.
And we talked about this also in the beginning of the segment about women being a lot more empathetic and a lot more caring towards other people, and that's their solution to a lot of problems. So if there were other females on the train, why didn't they?
Where was the caring here?
Where was the caring?
Yeah.
So it's just a very frustrating situation. It's so sad. My mom immediately called me after she found out about this and was like, if you're taking the metro, don't do that anymore. I have to, unless you want me to have a car here, Mom. But seriously, it's just so many missteps happened in this situation.
Men are not being told right now at the highest levels that things are expected of them and that they are needed to perform these functions. The only
fatherhood and great motherhood matter.
The only reason that we're having a conversation across this country right now about the National Guard being deployed into communities is because men are not policing their own streets, cleaning up their own corners.
The liberal women in D.C. are not used to seeing men stand up for justice and what's right and be protectors.
I think it goes back to just the ideas of the founding that, this country is fit for a virtuous people. And as you lose virtue, as you lose courage in the public square, then you're going to have government and authoritarian forces move in to fill the void left by the people. And so I'm not saying we're about to enter an authoritarian phase, but this is a symptom of that.
This is the vacuum in which authoritarianism has entered in historical precedent. I will say this before we close, because we've gone completely off where we were supposed to go and completely over time, but it's an important conversation, and I can't apologize for that. There is a young man in Georgia. His name is King Randall. His first name King, last name Randall. He's the founder of a school called the X for Boys. Back when I was in Chalkboard Review, we interviewed him early on, and he fills a fatherhood role for a lot of young, at-risk young men in Georgia. And he teaches them, if there's something going on, somebody is getting attacked or something, you step up. You make sure that you act respectfully, responsibly, calmly, in control, because you have a responsibility, a duty to your community. Again, there are young men and women who are craving that kind of foundation, and this is what excites me about the role that Generation X and the baby boomer generation has to play. Finally, the kids are listening. That Karen crew, the Cracker Barrel CEOs or the Star Wars groups, that crew, again, the hyper feminine whatever, they're being cast out of society. We're just being told, the Karen at the Phillies game, right?
Yeah.
Just told, get out of here. Like, nobody believes that's worth anything anymore. Now the elders now have the opportunity they should have had a while ago, but it was stripped from them, to be that model for younger generations to raise something that actually puts this country in a future that isn't that vacuum that brings in authoritarianism.
At the same time we're having this